Imagine pulling into your driveway after a long day and seeing your worst fear unfold on your own sidewalk. A man in a cheap badge forcing your child into an SUV while neighbors stand frozen. That image is what shook me awake that night. My name is Marcus Dawson. I build systems for a living. Software architectures where inputs produce predictable outputs. I measure risk, enumerate failure modes, and prefer problems solved before they become disasters. Life, for years, was a neat set of predictable processes. Work, family, soccer practice, dinner. Then the HOA installed a variable I hadn't anticipated. It started with a phone call from my wife, Sarah. Her voice was clipped. "Marcus, there's someone at the door. The HOA president is here. She says there's a community safety detention for Tyler." Tyler, our son, had been out with friends and should have been home already. My heart accelerated, but my head kicked in. I told her to lock the door, and I left the office early. By the time I arrived, the street seemed staged. Porch lights on, a black SUV idling, 3 men with laminated IDs milling on the sidewalk. Tyler sat on the curb, his hoodie torn, eyes darting. One of the men had zip ties in hand. The HOA president, Linda Price, stood square shoulders, issuing orders like a marshal on a stage. "We're detaining him for breaking community rules," Linda said when she saw me. Her voice was thin but practiced. "We're detaining him for breaking community rules." He matched the description of someone trespassing near the pool. I work with false positives. I know how flimsy matching descriptions can be. "Where's your authorization? Why are you restraining a minor?" She smiled a little. The kind of smile people use when they expect compliance. "This is a community safety detention until law enforcement arrives." That's when one of the men tightened a zip tie around Tyler's wrists and started toward the SUV. I didn't panic. Panic is sloppy. Instead, I did what my job taught me. Collect data, preserve evidence, and escalate smartly. I pulled out my phone and began recording. The timestamp, audio, and shaky frame would become crucial. "Stop, you're not a law enforcement agency," I said loud enough for cameras up and down the block. "You have no right to detain him." Linda's jaw hardened. One of the men shoved Tyler. A neighbor moved toward me, agitated, then thought better of it. This had the feel of a plan. Use theater and the trappings of authority to cow a family into silence. It worked on people who didn't question the badge. It worked until it didn't. Sarah came to the door. The second she stepped onto the porch, the air changed. She carries herself like someone who spends long hours asking pointed questions in courtrooms. She is a district attorney. Everything she said from that point was precise, ironclad, and purposeful. "Step away from my son," she said. She did not shout. She did not tremble. She displayed her ID and her business card and asked to see the men's authorization paperwork. One of them fumbled. The laminated IDs were obviously printed, their badges cheap. The document they presented, a photocopy of a county letter, had a wrong font and a missing seal. Sarah asked for the names of the contractors and the HOA's legal counsel, then called the sheriff's office to report an attempted unlawful detention. While she talked, I kept filming, capturing the men's voices, Linda's remarks, and the zip-tied hands of my boy. Evidence is a compass in chaos. When the deputy arrived and viewed the footage, his expression hardened. He asked Linda for the paperwork. She produced a page that looked official at a glance. A closer look, though, showed tracing and alteration. The deputy placed the men into custody for unlawful restraint and began an investigation into fraud. In the hours and days that followed, what unfolded felt like both a legal drama and an engineering problem being debugged. Criminal charges were filed against the men who had grabbed my son. The sheriff's office followed the paper trail. Copies purchased locally, cash payments to contractors, unfiled annexation records. The county subpoenaed HOA bank records and found payments to shell contractors for community enforcement. I'm used to building systems that reveal failure modes. Seeing the pattern here was like noticing a recurring exception in a log file. Notice after notice, overcharged fines, votes reported without quorum, and signatures that didn't belong to the people listed. We discovered forged meeting minutes that retroactively justified draconian rules and a culture that rewarded intimidation. Sarah used her position to open a broader inquiry. The county attorney's office launched a civil investigation into the HOA, and the board was placed under temporary receivership while auditors reviewed the books. Linda Price was charged with conspiracy and fraud. The men who had taken Tyler were prosecuted for false imprisonment. The community watched as the scaffolding of fear collapsed. What mattered most to me was not only the criminal outcome, but the cultural change that followed. Neighbors who had once whispered about fines and threats now came forward with their own folders of evidence. They brought photographs, emails, records of illegal fees. We ran community workshops on legal rights, on the limits of HOA authority. The sheriff's office issued a clear policy. Private associations may not detain a resident. Complaints must go through proper channels. Tyler recovered faster than I expected. Kids bounced back. He went back to soccer practice, scored a goal or two, and asked me if we could get a new net for the yard. Simple requests. When the world feels safe, become ordinary miracles. I learned something essential that summer. Systems, legal, social, technological, can be manipulated by people with intent, but systems can also be repaired by transparency, documentation, and community action. Evidence was a tool that freed my son and dismantled a tyrant's flimsy kingdom. The HOA board was reconstituted with accountable members. Linda moved out of the neighborhood, and the board posted a public apology. Neighbors still talk about the incident, but the tone is different. Curious, not fearful. When I walk Tyler to the bus stop now, people nod with recognition, not avoidance. Most engineers don't expect to become activists. Most prosecutors don't expect to be neighbors. We all played our parts. The thing that stayed with me wasn't the anger or the court transcripts. It was the way ordinary people found the collective voice. When fear was replaced with records and courage, a system corrected itself. Sarah started a county-wide training program for prosecutors and community leaders, teaching how to spot HOA overreach and document abuses. We built a toolkit with templates and checklists and shared it with neighboring districts. That small effort changed policy beyond our block, and life went on.